Welcome back to the Heatio Home Energy Show, where we bring you real insights into home energy solutions and eco-smart technologies. Today, we're back with special guest speaker Chris Higgs, Managing Director of Freedom Heat Pumps, and Heatio Commercial Director Tom Farquhar. In the last two episodes, we talked about Chris and Tom's journey into heat pumps, the barriers installers face in upskilling to heat pumps, and how we address the industry challenges installers are experiencing. And today, we're going to explore how we build customer confidence in heat pumps to drive adoption and tackle the 1.7 million boilers installed in the UK each year. What can I do to save money on my energy bills? How can I save money on my energy bills? And I think that's where we wanted to chat with Tom around that. How when you're seeing these consumers coming in on this journey around generic energy saving, what can they do to move down that process? At some point on that journey, the conversation is going to turn to heat pumps. It might not be the first thing on the list, but with the Heatio home energy management system going into the home and starting to learn the home and making those recommendations, when that customer does get to that point when they want to make a decision, and if a heat pump is the item on the list, what is it that installers can be saying to customers to help them make that transition? Or what are we doing as an industry right now that might be the next thing where the reins start to get released that we'll see heat pumps going in greater numbers?
I think the main issue with heat pumps not going in huge numbers at the moment is that people probably ask too many questions. We've developed an industry where consumers ask how everything works. And this is one of the things that Graham mentioned on the last show, and that's you wouldn't walk into a car showroom and say, can you tell me how the engine works? You walk in there and go, I know that a car will work, so I just want to choose the one that's right for me. And when I'm ready for another one, I'll get another car. We have to, when you get a consumer on and you talk to them about a heat pump, the first thing everyone tends to do is start explaining how they work, try and sell them the technology and that it's going to do what it says on the tin. We need to move past that and just go, the heat pump's just like a boiler. It's a heat source. If you want one, we can fit one. It'll work the same way, as in you'll have heating and hot water, and move past all these questions. We need to move away from asking how the thing works when countries like Norway have done 64% of their homes and we're at 1% and still trying to tell people that it does what it says on the tin.
Do you not think there's a lot that we can learn from like the EV market though? So if you look at the way that electric vehicles are sold, obviously we had range anxiety for a long while, and obviously that's been combated, whether it's through just development or whether it's through more information. But I need to double check my figures here, but because I haven't got my phone on me, but I'm pretty sure there is roughly the same amount of electric vehicles on the roads in the UK as there are heat pumps in the UK, which again is something that people don't talk about. And if that's correct, then why do we not capitalise on that a little bit more? You know, why are we not saying that, well, actually, you know, heat pumps are as prevalent and as popular as electric vehicles, because people don't have that same issue with selecting an electric vehicle. Now, admittedly, it's a bit more of an emotional purchase, but it's still it's still an expensive purchase. It's still a purchase that's more expensive than the internal combustion engine version, much like a heat pump is more expensive version of a admittedly much more energy efficient, but a more expensive version of the fossil fuel gas boiler. You know, so I think there's a lot that we can draw from the electric vehicle industry and try and take some of that marketing and promotion and the way that industry is discussed almost as a, well, this is just the next logical step. You know, let's not get, perhaps too involved in the vapor compression cycle, for instance. You know,
but that's exactly. I think that's exactly it. If you, I was having some back and forth with a guy on LinkedIn yesterday, and he said that he was buying a house and he'd gone to view the house, and there was a heat pump at the house, and he asked the estate agent. He was blown away by the fact that the estate agent who was showing him around didn't know what the output capacity was of that heat pump.
That does shock me.
That's the shocks me why he's asking.
Well, but this is it.
You don't go to a stage and go, how big's the boiler? Is there a boiler? Well, it must work, because you're not going to sell me a house where...
I don't think the estate agent would have known what the output capacity of the boiler was.
That's what I'm saying. They shouldn't need to.
Because I
but does that not show a lack of confidence in perhaps that end user has had a poor experience, or they know someone that's had a poor experience?
Or is it somebody? I mean, the heat pumps, just like electric vehicles, they're following that same adoption curve that most technologies follow. And then all of a sudden, with electric vehicles, I'm sure the same people were asking the similar type questions. And then all of a sudden, Tesla come in and go, don't worry about that.
Yeah,
Just look how nice things are. Or look what, and there'll be some slick, sexy videos that go out. And it'll just be when people start just calling them a green boiler. And we just simplify it and people just start taking them. But then people like that, potentially they're more, is it more a kind of an element of, I'm going to show that energy, that estate agent. Maybe they should, maybe the energy, I believe the estate agent should know that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask this question because I'm going to prove to them my knowledge. Because that in reality, nobody really cares about that.
I guess so. I mean, obviously, we don't know the person. Being honest, because I'm an incredible geek, I wouldn't necessarily ask the estate agent. I wouldn't assume that they didn't know. I would just think, oh, well, I'm going to look at the name badge and then come back later and do a calc. God, that's really boring. But yeah, no, that's
you've gone too far.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would.
But if you got every gas installer, every boiler installer tomorrow, so every time they turn up to someone that's rung up and said, my boiler's broken, I need a new one, or I think it's going to break and I need a new one, you'd have 1.5 million interactions between a gas installer and a homeowner. And if you just said, do you want a new boiler or do you want to go renewable? Just did that.
Yeah.
That would immediately have homeowners going, well, the guy I trust to swap my boiler is saying that there's a renewable alternative. Before you've even done anything else, you've now got confidence because they're saying it. Whereas what's happening at the moment is they're going and going, yeah, I could put your new boiler in, the majority.
Yeah.
Whereas if all they did was say, oh, there's a renewable alternative, immediately you'd start building confidence 1.5 million times every year.
So what is their driver to do that? And if you're the installer, we've discussed this route that if an installer genuinely wants to get involved, the standards are being simplified. There's companies like Freedom that can supply with training, design, specifications, supply the components. So then, and then you may, so there's an opportunity for better awareness to consumers. And that's ultimately what happened with solar PV. The boom came with solar PV when consumers all of a sudden became aware that they could make an absolute fortune off this. It was like 2012 when the feed-in towers hadn't been cut and we've seen the supply chain go through the roof. So when we take that consumer side of things, then there's two sides to it, isn't there? We can either, the consumers can become more aware and they can be coming in asking the question of the installer. So there's a potential that industry and manufacturers, suppliers, just like Tesla have done, go out there and make this case to consumers, make them go to the installer and say, can I have one of those renewable boilers rather than the fossil fuel ones? Or as you say, the installers can be promoting that.
Well, you're going to have to do both, because if you did leave a one which is demand, all that would happen is they'd get a blocker because 120,000 boiler installers, 4,000 on MCS. The chance is every time you get someone, they're going to be like, I don't do that.
But would that change if the installer...
So if you pulled it today, you'd have a problem. And then you'd have to slowly, more and more...
But that's what they're doing, isn't it? But if that consumer comes in and goes to that MCS, goes to their local installer, the installer, through the routes, through the simplified standards, there's a route there to take it if the installer is willing to engage it. Because I think if that consumer comes on and says, I really want one of those boilers, I want those green renewable boilers, if the installer is looking for work or is maybe struggling for work, I'll tell you what, I'll take that away, I'm going to have a look at it and then circumvent and go through that process. But we know the majority of installers are perfectly busy doing boiler installations. So what is in it for the installer? And this is a question that it's been kicked around so much. What is in it for the installer to warrant them saying, that customer's coming in, I've got plenty of work on, I'm not going to make any more, really, from my day rate of doing a boiler or whether I'm doing a heat pump. And I could do heat pumps every day to the day I retire, boilers every day until the day I retire, and it's still going to keep busy. What's the reason why I'm going to flag up to the customer, or I'm going to take that inquiry off that customer?
We get quite a lot coming through who just want to do what's perceived as the right thing, or what is the right thing, which is they want to migrate their business away from fossil fuels and they want to be installing renewable technology. So that's one sort of tranche of customers that we deal with. But also they see it as a chance to operate in an industry with less competition. So they might not necessarily, as you say, the day rate may not necessarily be any different to what they would ordinarily be getting, but the competition is much less. So the conversion rate may be much higher.
Okay. And it must be more interesting. We're using the terminology engineers.
Yeah.
If you're an engineer, you must be inquisitive. You must be interested in working with these different types of systems. So maybe there is there will be a natural drive there, but maybe the consumer drive hasn't hasn't happened yet. But what do you think about this challenge that if a consumer comes in at the moment, we talked about it on the show with Graham a little bit, but when a consumer comes in and they are faced with, as you mentioned before, Tom, this whole fabric first approach. I've gone on record and said I'm heat pump first, not heat pump only. I think there is an argument to say you do the heat pump and then you start to look at the other things as part of that engagement journey with that customer.
But you could go one step further and I'd say it's heat pump first whenever it's possible. So if someone came along and went, I'm ripping my house apart, I want to put all the insulation in, obviously then let's insulate, as you should be doing with your boiler or any other heat source. But if they say, look, my boiler's broken, you either fit me a heat pump today or I'll go for a boiler, then you take the opportunity to get the heat pump in. You don't miss the opportunity because you wanted to do everything else, because to me that just makes no sense.
And there is, and you can understand why there's a hesitation, and I would imagine there's, if you were to survey the MCS approved installers that are out there fitting heat pumps today, that will get quite a negative response, because I know when I've put it on LinkedIn, I've had the negative response. But that is because at the moment there is a purist view on heat pump systems about the higher the efficiency that you can get to justify the cost, and ultimately they can do it. And these systems should have been designed this way for such a long period of time.
But none of those people have been advocating, fabric first approach before you put a new boiler in.
Well, I'm sure they are. I'm sure there's people out there.
But not turning down work and saying, I'm not going to fit a boiler. You don't.
Sorry, no, not before, but yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's, well, we'll put a new boiler in. You should probably insulate. Might be some of them is what they say. Whereas heat pumps, you actually see people who are going around saying, I'll turn down work if you're not going to take a fabric first approach, change all your emitters, run at a lower temperature.
So does that would that go in the same category or same bucket as we're talking protection? So we've got the MCS standards and the levels, how onerous they were, the requirement to go on a 3 to 5 day training course, annual audits of the installations, all these things that could on one hand be called a bottleneck to the industry, but at the same time they also safeguarded the industry. We recognize that. And then from a design and specification perspective for systems, the RHI, the renewable heat incentive, you received more incentive the more efficient your system.
Yeah.
So again, another way of ensuring the
but
quality.
there was a balance point. There was a really interesting balance point between what's it going to cost additionally to reduce the efficiency versus increase the efficiency versus what I'm going to benefit on the renewable heat incentive. And there was a real sort of cost benefit balance point that you had to sort of measure between the two. I think for me, it has to be customer led. So I went for this may be controversial, but whatever. I've got a green heat pump. But I've gone hybrid with my installation. So I've retained my combi boiler, and I've got obviously a bright green, incredible Hulk looking heat pump. But that journey came from what would I recommend to my neighbours if they came to me saying, "Oh, you've got a heat pump. I want a heat pump. What should we have with our house?" And I looked at it going, right, well, all of our combi boilers, because the houses are relatively new, they say 2 years old, these combi boilers. So it makes absolutely no sense to me, ethically, just to pull the thing off the wall and go and bin it. It just doesn't make sense to me to go and bin the thing. So I go, right, so I want to maintain it, but I want it to be doing the least amount possible. Yep. So then put my heat pump in. It's sized for the entire property, but now the boiler comes on for maybe 10% of the year. So the vast majority of my carbon emissions have been moved over to the heat pump and are obviously much more efficient, but I've not had to go through anywhere near the same sort of level of disruption that I might have had to do with a heat pump, with a full sort of engineered system. With that said though, mine is very much I'm doing a phased approach on mine. So it's heat pump first, then it'll be cylinder this year, and then it might be rads next year. It might be rads this year and then cylinder next year. So I'm still going on that journey, but I think sometimes where we take that really sort of purist approach of everything's going to be done on day one, even someone as as dedicated to heat pumps as I am, I just moved into my very first owned house a couple of years ago. The idea of saying to my wife, right, I know we just bought this house. It's lovely, isn't it? And she goes, it's beautiful. And I go, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to start pulling radiators.
Are you married, mate? You are married, are you?
I am married.
Doesn't mention it.
And how long have you been in the industry?
13 years. Cheers, Tom. So, so if I was to sit down and go, right, we're going to start, we've got to redo the pipe works. We need, because I've got, plastic pipe work throughout the house. We're going to pull the radiators off the wall. We're going to install a cylinder. So the understairs cupboard is gone. She'd stay with me because she loves me. Do you know what I mean? She's as dedicated to heat pumps as I am, but it would have been a difficult conversation. But instead, going on that journey where it's, right, well, let's get the heat pump. Let's offset a huge amount of our emissions. But again, taking pointers from the electric vehicle industry, I drive a hybrid vehicle, which to some purists, they go fully electric or nothing. And I go, but a hybrid makes sense to me because I can do 90% of my driving is going to be on battery, and then just on motorway driving, I'm going to be on the internal combustion engine. In terms of the cost for the vehicle, much cheaper than the fully electric version was. Yeah. So that cost benefit just worked out really well. So again, I think there's a lot of similarities we can.
But that's got to be a tricky one, isn't it? Because I mean, it definitely sounds like you're the guy right in the middle on both of them. So the hybrid approach, right?
Definition of sitting on the fence.
yeah.
No, but the benefit with the car analogy makes complete sense. But the challenge, I mean, as one of the biggest distributors in the UK, if I was to say to you that an 8-9 kilowatt hybrid package, so no, we're not talking hot water cylinder. Mm-hmm. What's that going to cost me?
If you've got to buy the boiler, it starts to make less sense. But if you've got the boiler there already, whether it's oil, LPG, natural gas, you're probably talking 3-ish day install. Yeah, it's definitely going to be at least a day and a half quicker than full heat pump install. But then you've just got the heat pump. And that's about it. Heat pump, in terms of like big capital stuff, heat pump, circulation pump, and a couple of bits. Whereas when we're talking about a full heat pump install, it's going to be new rads in some of the rooms. Now, obviously you listened before about your conversations around, which rooms to change radiators and all that good stuff. So it might be all the rads, it might be one rad, but your chances are you're going to have to. With me having a combi, I'm going to have to put in a domestic hot water cylinder, because I don't have one already.
That package, though, you say you're saving a big cost in the and inconvenience of finding space for a hot water cylinder, absolutely. But the cost of the materials for that installation, you've got to be getting close to £4,500.
Yeah, you probably are. Yeah. So if you've got to change all the rads and domestic hot water cylinder.
No. Sorry, I mean for a hybrid.
Oh, sorry, for a hybrid. Sorry, yes.
If you stay with my existing boiler, I'm not going to touch too much around the home. I've got to be looking at £4,000 to £4,500, maybe even £5,000 for that installation.
True.
And there's no support for that type of install under the boiler upgrade scheme. So that's got to be I actually did a hybrid installation at my brother's house quite recently, and I do advocate that approach because it is a customer going on a journey towards sustainability, but the customer's got to be willing to go on the journey, but maybe not necessarily, because to put £5,000 towards an installation, which is essentially going to have. I mean, I'm assuming if you're running on gas, you've got it switching a certain efficiency points.
Well, it's an ambient temperature, so I've calculated at what temperature the heat pump runs out of steam in terms of temperature, and then obviously we switch over. But I definitely know where you're coming from. I think the point is that there is no one size fits all. So just like the fabric first approach, again that's a one size fits all. Right, everything should be fabric first. You go,
but if the government had done that from the beginning and said there's no one size fits all, we'd be in a lot better position. Whereas what happened was they said we need to improve all the housing stock at the same time as advocating heat pumps. So now there's a big misconception that heat pumps don't work in leaky properties. That's all you see everywhere. And
I think it's important to say that a heat pump will work anywhere. If you swimming pool heat pumps, I mean, you can't get leakier than a swimming pool. Do you know what I mean? The thing's got no roof on. Do you know what I mean? There's no cover over the top of the heat pump when you're in there. But if you're in there when there's a cover on, something's gone desperately wrong. Do you know what I mean? But there's no that's a really good example of something that's incredibly leaky. So a heat pump will work anywhere. I mean, we've got industrial units. I know Graham was trying to spec one up for a living statue type thing. So to heat a statue up to like 37 degrees. So it felt like, you were touching some sort of your skin temperature. A heat pump is just another heat source of X amount of kilowatts. And it's just that I genuinely don't know where it came from, this idea that the only well-insulated properties will work.
Well, it's because they made a requirement that for RHI, for example, you have to meet these insulation requirements. So then everybody went, well, it must mean I have to have insulation for a heat pump.
It definitely makes sense, because if you're at the sort of pinch point between two heat pumps or one heat pump on a property, then it's going to be I imagine it'll be cheaper to increase the insulation levels than just to put two heat pumps on.
It makes complete logical sense.
Yeah.
But the problem is then everyone started saying, well, heat pumps don't work in leaky properties. Now I want to know about the technology. Now I want you to sell me how it works. And then we went down this rabbit hole.
That's your temperature or kilowatt anxiety, isn't it? Same as we used to have with the range anxiety on cars. People get really into it, right? Well, what are the batteries made of? Because I know that particular battery or that construction doesn't give as much range as a different battery construction. But now everyone's sort of reached a sort of midpoint where they're all roughly 300, 350 miles kind of thing at top end. So people don't ask those same questions anymore. They just assume.
Well, it also becomes, I think sometimes we're trying to kind of fight an inevitable curve and say that adoption curve is tried and tested. Those innovators, those early adopters, they're going to ask those questions anyway.
Yeah,
because they're the ones that are going to break the ground. The ones who are going to go, they're going to understand. They're going to go through the journey and understand. All right, so I'm going to use I want my local heating engineer to do this job, and I'm going to have that conversation with him. And then we're going to realize that in order for them to go through that process, they've got to be MCS accredited, but I'm going to take that risk because they understand it. So they're going to go through these battles. But now we're talking about the next step and how do we get to 600,000 heat pumps a year going in?
Yeah.
And for all the great work that people have done to safeguard the industry, there's a fundamental question of how do we get to those kind of volumes so that we start seeing mass decarbonization, mass switching away from fossil fuels. But there's two fundamental parts to it. I think we've got to see better controls, and the technology itself has got to improve.
Yeah.
Because one of those drawbacks that we talked about, why did we set those minimum standards in terms of insulation? Why did we set the performance metrics for heat pumps and reward those who were more efficient? Heat pumps at that time weren't designed for for the ability to get anywhere close to the temperatures boilers were outputting. And I'm not saying we're there now, but the ish show there was high temperature heat pumps capable of delivering high temperature. And when we start down this journey now and we start saying, well, how do we talked about the RAINs getting released, the simplified standards, the ability for installers to start engaging that journey and start going through that process and easier for them to get involved. How do we, if we've got this opportunity to start saying the RAINs can be released more, it's going to be more affordable for more consumers to get involved, utilizing heat pumps that are capable of delivering higher temperatures, and then starting people on a journey towards sustainability and reducing their carbon emissions. That's got to be something that maybe the old guard of heat pump installers won't adopt, and they will stand there for the rest of time and say, no, it is low temperature, high SCOP, my installations are 14 to 20,000 pounds. But surely this new guard of installers that are coming in that are used to doing boiler replacements will start to look at this, and consumers will start to look at this.
I just think any reduction in carbon emissions is a step in the right direction. I mean, there's an old saying from, I'm trying to remember who wrote the book now. I can't remember, it'll come to me, but there's an old saying, if we do a little, then we'll achieve a little, which, I'm not saying we do a little, but a heat pump, even if it's only offsetting 80% of your carbon emissions, it's still a ton of carbon emissions. It's still a lot of carbon emissions we're offsetting, and that is, if I had a choice, if someone came to me and said, right, I can only have a heat pump if I operate it in conjunction with a hybrid system, which would be a crazy conversation for someone to have with me just on the street, just come up and go, I can only have a heat pump if it's but Yeah, if I was having that conversation, then I would never turn around and say, right, you have to have a full heat pump system. I'd say, right, what can we do? Is there because there might be a practical reason if they've got a low amp or relatively low amp sort of incoming supply, and they physically can't have two heat pumps. Well, you maintain the existing boiler and put a heat pump on. Well, that's still a hybrid system. It's just you haven't done it the same way perhaps I've done it, but it's still a hybrid system. Exactly. Well, I suppose technically it's a bivalent system, but I was brought up calling it a hybrid system. But anyway.
That's one you can teach them on the training course next when these installers start flooding in to start with your technical support. But that's about all we've got time for today. There is one point though that I wanted to make sure we covered. Back in April, we launched something called the Energy Challenge Group, which is a collective of consumers and members that have come together to address some of these challenges and suppose be part of those early adopters that are going on this journey. So in association with Freedom, and as Heatio as an MCS approved installer in our own rights, we are going to be offering the opportunity for one of our members to receive a completely free heat pump installation. We'll be getting lots of footage around it and doing lots of PR around it to try and help consumers to see how this works in practice and share this message. So please follow us on our social media channels. The announcement will be on there shortly, and you'll be able to see how you can enter the competition, become an Energy Challenge Group member, share any experiences you've had on ways in which you can save money on your energy bills, and share that knowledge with other people who are maybe starting on that journey. And tune in for another show in the not too far distant future. Thank you very much, gents.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.